Why are Range Rovers so unreliable? In 2022, the L405 full-size Range Rover was crowned the most unreliable car by Warranty-Wise, with an average repair bill of £1,607 and the most expensive repair costing a huge £23,890. That's over $30,000. The Range Rover is my favourite car, but it's well known that they suffer with numerous issues. How can a car that can cost over $200,000 new be so unreliable? I'm Shafi, this is the Car Crunch, let's get into it. Where does the unreliable reputation come from? Land Rover, the brand behind the Range Rover, was founded by British car manufacturer Rover Company in 1984, when the first Land Rover named the Series 1 was launched. Later on in 1970, the first Range Rover was launched, now known as the Range Rover Classic. Over time, the Range Rover model transitioned into a more upmarket SUV. This included packing it with more features and technology. Things like a super advanced air suspension system that can handle multiple terrains became standard, as well as luxurious amenities like heated and massaging seats. Now, while all this tech enhances the driving experience, it does mean that there are more potential points of failure and more costly maintenance to keep a Range Rover in tip-top condition. Range Rovers, like all other modern vehicles, rely heavily on electronic systems for various things. Unfortunately, this increased reliance on electronics gives rise to a common complaint: electrical problems. Malfunctions in the infotainment systems, sensors, and other electrical components are frustrating and can be costly to fix. The price of the car being so high doesn't really help, especially when there are much cheaper options from car makers like Kia, Honda, and Toyota that have much more reliable cars and almost all of the features, albeit a little bit less luxurious. Range Rovers are also well known for their comfortable rides, courtesy of that super advanced air suspension system that I mentioned earlier. These air suspension systems are amazing on and off-road when they're working. They're made up of many components, all of which can go wrong, so you can end up with issues like air leaks, sensor failures, and other problems that can ruin the ride and leave you with massive repair bills. Aside from the status and looks of a Range Rover, the next reason buyers usually go for one is the smooth ride. For cheap used Range Rovers, once the air suspension goes wrong, a lot of owners don't bother dealing with it anymore and list them for sale. That's why on Auto Trader, eBay and Facebook Marketplace, you can find a whole bunch of L322 Range Rovers and L320 Range Rover Sports from the mid-2000s with air suspension issues listed as spares or repairs. And if you look through the pictures on any of them, you'll notice the car generally sagging to one side or one of the corners sagging. The air suspension is expensive to maintain, and once it goes wrong, the numbers just stop making sense. Even newer shaped L405 Range Rovers and L494 Range Rover Sports, which were the shapes introduced around 2013, can be found for a hefty discount because of their air suspension or electrical issues. Car YouTuber Doug DeMuro famously bought a 2006 Range Rover in 2012, and he bought it with a 6-year warranty for $3,899. By the end of the 6-year period, when the warranty finished, it had paid out a whopping $21,276 in claims. I remember watching one of his videos about his Range Rover a few years ago, and he said he always leaves one small thing broken because if everything is working, something new will break. The sheer number and variety of issues used Range Rovers have is enough to give them a reputation of unreliability. Although personally I do think the high cost of maintaining them is somewhat to blame, as it tempts people to skimp on servicing or skimp on some of the maintenance, or even delay sorting some issues out until they get much worse. There are obvious reliability issues as well, to do with build quality and so on, but as I said, I think the expensive maintenance doesn't make it easy. The unreliability doesn't just affect these older Range Rovers. Recently there was a video going around on TikTok showing a lady in the UK that bought a Range Rover Velar brand new, and after only 2 years of use, the engine packed in, meaning it needed to be replaced. And that's after just 2 years. That's absolute madness. The interesting part was that she wasn't covered by the manufacturer warranty because she didn't get the car serviced after a year, which is what they request in the terms and conditions. She was told she'd have to pay something like £15,000 for a new engine from Land Rover. Now, whether or not the replacement should be covered by the warranty is one thing, but the engine just shouldn't be having these kind of issues after only 2 years, even if it didn't have the service at 1 year old. Although personally I do think this is an extreme case, so it's a bit of an anomaly. At the same time, it does make you question, why wouldn't you just stay on top of your servicing, especially with a car that you've just purchased brand new? In fairness to this lady though, this is a brand new car, it should be fine. And with any other brand, it probably would have been fine. It appears like the newest model Range Rovers aren't any different either. Forest Auto Reviews makes super catchy YouTube short videos reviewing cars in under 60 seconds. In a recent video he made about the new L460 shaped Range Rover, there weren't any hard faults, but there was one point where he showed that the door was very creaky. This isn't really a huge issue, but we're talking about a car that can cost over $200,000. For it to have a creaky door seems like bad build quality. And it seems like the unreliability will carry over into these new models. It looks like the Range Rover Sport isn't safe either. Cars with Miles, another YouTuber making catchy YouTube short videos about cars, made one about the new Range Rover Sport, and he mentioned in it that the gauge cluster would just randomly switch off. Now with all that being said, it's not really hard to see where the unreliable reputation comes from. What makes a car reliable? In this particular case, the way warranty-wise calculated the reliability of the Range Rover and all the other cars in the list was looking at the average cost of a repair, the highest cost of a repair, and the frequency of repairs. A reliable car would ideally be one that doesn't need any repairs outside of its regular servicing, even after its manufacturer warranty expires. Now obviously, this isn't exactly the case with any car out there, as they all need some work at some point. But in the case of the Range Rover, they generally need a lot of work. So we know that Range Rovers are unreliable, but where do they rank in terms of unreliability? Well, this whole video is based on the warranty-wise least reliable cars list. So let's have a look at where they're sitting in that list. Third least reliable is the L494 Range Rover Sport. And first on the list, the top most unreliable car is the L405 Range Rover. That's it for today. Subscribe to the channel for more.